sole of foot is made up of the following layers: skin, superficial fascia, deep fascia, plantar aponeurosis, deep transverse metatarsal ligaments, fibrous flexor sheaths, muscles of the sole of foot, plantar nerves, plantar arteries. Skin. The skin of the sole is made up of thick skin. It is tightly attached to the deep fascia by numerous fibrous bands. It contains numerous sweat glands. The skin over the weight-bearing areas of the sole, like heel, lateral margin, ball of foot, is relatively thicker than the rest of the sole. Superficial fascia. Superficial fascia. It is made up of subcutaneous fat in a meshwork of fibrous septa which anchor the skin with underlying deep fascia. It is thick and dense over the weight-bearing areas of the foot. The superficial fascia contains cutaneous nerves supplying the sole of the foot. They are medial calcaneal branches. They arise from tibial nerve. It supplies skin over posterior and medial portions of the sole. They correspond to dermatome S1. Cutaneous branches of medial plantar nerve. They supply the skin over the anteromedial part of the sole and medial 3.5 digits. They correspond to dermatome L4. Cutaneous branch of lateral plantar nerve. They supply skin over small anterolateral portion of the sole and lateral 1.5 digits. They correspond to dermatome L5. Deep fascia. It consists of central, medial and lateral parts. The central part is known as the plantar aponeurosis. The medial and lateral parts are known as the medial and lateral plantar fascia respectively. It is composed of dense bundles of collagen fibers arranged longitudinally in the central part and transversely in medial and lateral plantar fascia. In the region of toes, the deep fascia forms the deep transverse metatarsal ligaments and fibrous flexor sheaths. Plantar aponeurosis. It is triangular in shape, thick central part of the deep fascia of the sole. The narrow posterior part is attached to the medial tubercle of calcaneus. The broad anterior part splits into 5 bands, one for each digit, which are attached to transverse facial fibers. The digital nerves and vessels passes through the interval between the processes. Opposite to the metatarsophalangeal joints, it splits into superficial and deep layers. The superficial layer of plantar aponeurosis embeds into the skin fold between the sole and the toes and blends with the superficial transverse metatarsal ligaments. The deeper layer of the plantar aponeurosis splits into 2 bands to embrace the digital flexor tendons and blends with deep transverse metatarsal ligaments. The medial and lateral margins of the aponeurosis extend as lateral and medial vertical intermuscular septa, pass deeply and divide the plantar muscles into 3 groups: medial, intermediate and lateral. thin transverse septa arise from the vertical septa and divides the muscles of sole into 4 layers. Morphologically, it represents the distal continuation of plantaris tendon. Functions: maintains the longitudinal arches of foot by acting as tie beams. Provides origin to superficial group of plantar muscles. Protects plantar vessels and nerves from compression. Muscles of the sole of foot. It consists of 18 intrinsic and 4 extrinsic tendons in the sole of foot. The muscles of the sole are described in 4 layers from superficial to deep. First layer. It consists of 3 muscles. Abductor hallucis. Origin: from the medial tubercle of calcaneus, flexor retinaculum, plantar aponeurosis, and from medial intermuscular septum. Insertion: to the medial side of the base of the proximal phalanx of the great toe. Nerve supply: from the trunk of the medial plantar nerve. Actions: abduction of great toe. Flexor digitorum brevis. Origin: from the medial tubercle of calcaneum, plantar aponeurosis, and adjacent medial and lateral intermuscular septa. Insertion: the muscle divides into 4 tendons for the lateral 4 toes. Each tendon enters the fibrous flexor sheath of the corresponding digit, splits and spirals around the long flexor tendon, reunites and partially decussates, and finally splits and is inserted into the sides of the middle phalanx. Nerve supply: from the trunk of medial plantar nerve. Actions: plantar flexion of the lateral 4 toes. Abductor digiti minimi. Origin: from the medial and lateral tubercles of calcaneus, plantar aponeurosis, and adjacent part of the septum. Insertion: into the lateral surface of the base of the proximal phalanx of the little toe. Nerve supply: by the trunk of lateral plantar nerve. Actions: plantar flexion of the little toe. Second layer. It consists of 2 extrinsic tendons, flexor hallucis longus and flexor digitorum longus. 2 intrinsic muscles, flexor digitorum accessorius and 4 lumbricals. Flexor digitorum accessorius, quadratus plantae. Origin: it arises by 2 heads, medial and lateral head. The medial head is fleshy. It arises from medial surface of calcaneum and from medial tubercle. The lateral head is tendinous. It arises from the lateral tubercle of calcaneum and meets the medial head, separated by a triangular gap which is occupied by long plantar ligament. Insertion: the conjoined muscle belly is inserted into the lateral side of common tendon of flexor digitorum longus. Nerve supply by trunk of lateral plantar nerve. Actions. It corrects the diagonal pull of the flexor digitorum longus into direct plantar flexion of lateral foretoes. Permits plantar flexion of lateral foretoes in any position of the ankle joint. Lumbricals. There are 4 small muscles numbered from medial to lateral side. Origin. The first lumbrical is a unipennate muscle arising from the medial side of the flexor digitorum longus. The rest 3 are bipennate muscle and arise from the adjacent sides of the digital tendons of flexor digitorum longus. Insertion to the medial side of the base of proximal phalanx of the corresponding toe. It joins with the dorsal digital expansion, through which it is inserted into the dorsal surface of base of middle and terminal phalanges of lateral foretoes. Nerve supply. The first lumbrical is supplied by the medial plantar nerve. The second, third, and fourth are supplied by deep branches of lateral plantar nerve. Actions. They produce plantar flexion at metatarsophalangeal joints and dorsiflexion at the interphalangeal joints of lateral foretoes. They prevent the toes from buckling under during walking and running. Third layer. There are 3 muscles in this layer: flexor hallucis brevis, adductor hallucis, and flexor digiti minimi brevis. Flexor hallucis brevis. Origin. Flexor hallucis brevis has a bifurcate tendon of origin. The lateral limb arises from the plantar surface of the cuboid posterior to the groove for the tendon of fibularis longus and from the adjacent part of the lateral cuneiform. The medial limb has a deep attachment. It arises from 3 cuneiform boned and blends with the insertion of tendon of tibialis posterior. Insertion. The belly of the muscle divides into medial and lateral parts, the twin tendons of which are attached to the sides of the base of the proximal phalanx of the hallux. A sesamoid bone usually occurs in each tendon near its attachment. Nerve supply by medial plantar nerve. Action. It flexes the proximal phalanx of the great toe. Adductor hallucis. Origin. Adductor hallucis arises by oblique and transverse heads. The oblique head arises from the bases of the second, third, and fourth metatarsal bones and from the fibrous sheath of the tendon of peroneus longus. The transverse head arises from the plantar metatarsophalangeal ligaments of the third, fourth, and fifth toes, and from the deep transverse metatarsal ligaments between them. Insertion. Both the heads meet at acute angle and is inserted into the lateral side of the base of the proximal phalanx of great toe. Nerve supply by deep branch of lateral plantar nerve. Actions. It partly adducts the great toe towards axial line of foot and also stabilizes the metatarsal heads. Flexor digiti minimi brevis. Origin. Arises from the medial part of the plantar surface of the base of the fifth metatarsal bone and from the sheath of fibularis longus. Insertion. Inserts into the lateral side of the base of the proximal phalanx of the little toe. Nerve supply by superficial branch of the lateral plantar nerve. Actions. It flexes the metatarsophalangeal joint of the little toe. Fourth layer. The fourth layer of muscles of the foot consists of 7 intrinsic muscles, 3 plantar and 4 dorsal interossei and 2 tendons of tibialis posterior and peroneus longus. Dorsal interossei. These are 4 bipinnate muscles. Origin. Each of the muscle arise by 2 heads from the sides of the shaft of the adjacent metatarsal bones. Insertion. They are attached to the bases of the proximal phalanges and to the dorsal digital expansions. The first inserts into the medial side of the second toe. The other 3 pass to the lateral sides of the second, third, and fourth toes. Nerve supply. Dorsal interossei are supplied by the deep branch of the lateral plantar nerve, except that of the fourth interossei, which is supplied by the superficial branch of the lateral plantar nerve. Actions. Dorsal interossei abduct the toes. They also flex the metatarsophalangeal joints and extend the interphalangeal joints of the lesser toes. Plantar interossei. These are 3 unipinnate muscles. Origin. They arise from the bases and medial sides of the third, fourth, and fifth metatarsal bones. Insertion. They are inserted into the medial sides of the bases of the proximal phalanges of the corresponding toes and into their dorsal digital expansions. Nerve supply. By the deep branch of the lateral plantar nerve, except that of the fourth interossei, which is supplied by the superficial branch of the lateral plantar nerve. Actions. They adduct the third, fourth, and fifth toes, flex the metatarsophalangeal joints, and extend the interphalangeal joints. Nerves of the sole of foot. Nerves of the sole of foot. These are derived from medial and lateral plantar nerves, the terminal branches of tibial nerve. The division takes place under cover of flexor retinaculum. Medial plantar nerve. It is the larger terminal division of the tibial nerve and lies lateral to the medial plantar artery. From its origin under the flexor retinaculum, it passes deep to abductor hallucis, then appears between it and flexor digitorum brevis gives off a medial proper digital nerve to the great toe and divides near the metatarsal basis into three common plantar digital nerves. Muscular branches. From the trunk, it gives branches to adductor hallucis and flexor digitorum brevis. To flexor hallucis brevis by first digital nerve to the medial side of big toe. To first lumbrical by second digital nerve. Cutaneous nerves supply skin of medial 3.5 toes and larger medial part of the sole. Each digital nerve supplies the dorsum of terminal phalanx. Lateral plantar nerve. It is the smaller terminal branch of the tibial nerve. It begins deep to the flexor retinaculum. It appears in the sole deep to the abductor hallucis. It passes forwards and laterally to the base of the fifth metatarsal in between the first and the second layers of the muscles. On reaching between flexor digitorum brevis and abductor digiti minimi, it divides into superficial and deep branches. Branches. From the trunk, cutaneous to the lateral part of the sole. Muscular branches, abductor digiti minimi and flexor digitorum accessories. Branches from superficial branch. It divides into lateral and medial branches. Lateral branch supplies flexor digiti minimi brevis, third plantar interosseus, fourth dorsal interosseus, skin on the lateral side of little toe. Medial branch communicates with the medial plantar nerve and supplies the skin of the fourth cleft. Branches from deep branch. It supplies adductor hallucis, 3 lumbricals, all the interossei except those of the fourth intermetatarsal space. Plantar arteries. There are 2 plantar arteries, medial and lateral plantar arteries. Medial plantar artery. The medial plantar artery is the smaller terminal branch of the posterior tibial artery. It arises midway between the medial malleolus and the medial calcaneal tubercle and passes distally along the medial side of the foot. With the medial plantar nerve, lateral to it, deep to abductor hallucis. It terminates by dividing into 2 branches. A small branch, which passes along the medial side of the big toe, and anastomosis with digital branch of first plantar metatarsal artery on the lateral side of big toe. A large branch which divides into 3 superficial digital branches and anastomosis with first to third plantar metatarsal arteries. Lateral plantar artery. The lateral plantar artery is the larger terminal branch of the posterior tibial artery. It arises beneath the flexor retinaculum and passes distally and laterally to the fifth metatarsal base. The lateral plantar nerve is medial. At the base of the fifth metatarsal, it curves medially with concavity facing proximally and runs towards the first interdigital space joins with the dorsalis pedis artery and thus forms the plantar arch. Branches. Muscular to the adjoining muscles. Superficial branches to the skin and fascia laterally. Anastomotic branch to anastomose at the lateral border of foot with lateral tarsal and arcuate arteries. Calcaneal branch to heel. Branches from the plantar arch. 3 proximal perforating arteries. They ascend dorsally through the gap between the heads of 2nd, 3rd and 4th dorsal interossei and anastomose with corresponding dorsal metatarsal arteries. 4 plantar metatarsal arteries. They pass forward in the intermetatarsal space and ends by dividing into a pair of plantar digital arteries. Near their point of division, each plantar metatarsal artery gives a distal perforating artery to join the corresponding dorsal metatarsal artery. The first plantar metatarsal artery sends a digital branch to the medial side of the great toe.